When you're face to face with an arrogant or toxic person, the very first instinct your body has is to react. Maybe you feel your chest tighten, your jaw clench, or your heart rate climb like you're about to step into a boxing ring. That's your brain going into defense mode because arrogance feels like an attack and your body wants to protect you. The problem is when you let that natural impulse take over, you usually give the other person exactly what they want, a reaction. And that's the key thing to remember. Arrogant people thrive on pulling you into their chaos because your reaction feeds their ego. Staying calm doesn't mean you're weak or passive. It means you're smart enough not to hand over control. Picture arrogance like a storm coming at you. It's loud, it's messy, and it wants to pull you in. Now imagine yourself as a rock planted firmly in the ground. The storm can rage, the wind can howl, but that rock doesn't move. When you stay grounded in a conversation, you stop the storm from controlling the environment. This is about posture, breathing, and tone. Keeping your voice level, your shoulders relaxed, and your pace slow sends a signal not just to them, but to yourself that you're in control of the moment. Think about the last time you saw someone lose their cool in a heated exchange. They might have had a valid point, but the moment they snapped, the focus shifted from the argument to their outburst. That's what arrogance feeds on, distraction. A toxic person doesn't need to prove they're right. They just need you to look wrong. That's why your calm is your superpower. Instead of throwing energy into proving a point, you save it by refusing to get pulled into a shouting match. Your calmness exposes their chaos without you having to say a single word. One of the best techniques to stay grounded is to pause before responding. Silence is uncomfortable for arrogant people because they thrive on speed, dominance, and control of the narrative. When you give yourself a pause, even just a couple of seconds, it's like putting a buffer between their chaos and your peace. That short pause allows your rational brain to catch up with your emotional brain. Suddenly, you're not reacting, you're choosing how to respond. That little shift gives you the upper hand because you're operating on intention, not impulse. Another powerful move is to anchor yourself with body language. Toxic people pay attention to how you react, and your body often speaks louder than your words. If you're crossing your arms tightly, tapping your foot, or rolling your eyes, you're giving away your agitation. Instead, try grounding yourself physically. Keep your feet flat on the floor, your shoulders back, and your hands relaxed. This physical stability reflects emotional stability, and it communicates that their arrogance isn't shaking you. It's not about pretending you don't feel irritated. It's about choosing not to let your irritation leak out in a way that gives them control. And here's the thing most people forget. Calm is contagious. When you maintain your composure in the face of arrogance, it changes the temperature of the whole conversation. Even if the other person doesn't calm down, everyone else who might be observing the exchange will notice who stayed level-headed and who lost control. Your calm presence sets a tone of authority, and authority doesn't shout, it doesn't scramble, it doesn't need to prove itself. Authority just stands firm. When you embody that, you flip the script because suddenly their arrogance looks smaller compared to your groundedness. The last piece of staying calm and grounded is self-talk. When arrogance comes at you, it's easy to take it personally, but most of the time, their behavior has more to do with their insecurity than your worth. Remind yourself in that moment, this isn't about me, this is about them. That mental reset is what keeps you from internalizing their words or spiraling into defensiveness. You're not minimizing what they're doing, you're refusing to let it stick to you. Self-talk is like putting on armor before stepping into battle. The words bounce off and you keep your peace intact because you know who you are, and no amount of arrogance can rewrite that truth. Boundaries are not about pushing people away. They're about protecting what matters most to you, your peace, your time, and your energy. The challenge is that when you're dealing with arrogant or toxic people, they often view boundaries as a challenge to their control. That's why the smartest way to set them is to keep them short and clean without slipping into explanations. The moment you start explaining, you open the door for them to debate, twist, or poke holes in your reasoning. A simple, "I'm not available for that," is more powerful than a long justification that sounds like permission for them to argue. Arrogant people thrive on pulling you into explanations because it keeps the spotlight on them. Imagine someone asking why you didn't agree with their opinion, and instead of just saying, "That doesn't work for me," you dive into a 5-minute breakdown of your reasons. What happens? They cut you off, dismiss your points, or twist your words to make you look unreasonable. That's why explanations rarely protect you. They just hand the toxic person more material to use against you. Boundaries without explanation leave no cracks for them to squeeze through. Think of it like locking your front door. You don't need to post a sign explaining to the world why you locked it. You lock it because it's your house, and you don't owe anyone a tour of your reasoning. It's the same with your boundaries in conversation. You get to decide where your lines are and how you enforce them without feeling guilty for not justifying yourself. Toxic people will often try to make you believe that your boundary is rude, unfair, or disrespectful, but that's just because your boundary is taking away their control. Your job isn't to convince them, it's to keep your door locked. One of the best tools for setting boundaries without explanation is short, confident phrases. Things like, "I'm not interested in that," "That won't work for me," or "I'll pass on that," are clear and final. Notice how none of these phrases invite further discussion. They're not rude, but they also don't give space for manipulation. When you say them with a calm, steady tone, you're signaling that this line isn't up for negotiation. Toxic people might push back, but the less you say, the less they have to use against you. Now, let's address the discomfort that often comes with this. Most of us feel pressure to explain because we don't want to seem harsh or uncaring, but here's the truth. Explanations are often about trying to manage the other person's reaction, and that's not your responsibility. You can't control how an arrogant person feels about your boundary, but you can control how clearly and consistently you deliver it. Releasing yourself from the pressure to over-explain is what gives you freedom. It allows you to hold the line without carrying the weight of their emotions. What usually happens when you set a firm boundary is resistance. A toxic person might laugh, roll their eyes, or try to guilt you into backing down. That's expected. But the more consistent you are, the faster they learn that your boundaries aren't moving targets. It's not about winning them over. It's about training yourself to hold the line no matter what. Over time, you'll notice that your boundaries become second nature, and your confidence in setting them grows stronger because you've proven to yourself that you can protect your space without needing to justify it. The key mindset to remember is this: a boundary is not an argument, it's a decision. It doesn't require agreement, validation, or approval from anyone else. The moment you stop explaining yourself, you take away the leverage that toxic people depend on. Boundaries are not about shutting people out. They're about creating the conditions where respect can exist. And when someone refuses to respect your boundary, that tells you everything you need to know about how much access they should have to your time, your energy, and your peace. Toxic and arrogant people love to bait you into a fight because arguments give them the spotlight they're hungry for. The more emotional you get, the more they feel like they're winning. That's why one of the smartest tools you can keep in your pocket is the use of neutral phrases. These are short, calm responses that don't agree with their arrogance, but also don't fuel it. Neutral phrases let you redirect the conversation without turning it into a power struggle. They keep the control in your hands, not theirs. Think about it like dealing with someone who's tossing verbal hooks into the water, trying to reel you in. Every sarcastic jab, every condescending tone, every unnecessary lecture is just another hook. If you bite, they've got you in the argument. But when you respond with something neutral like, "That's one way to look at it," you're acknowledging their comment without stepping on the hook. They don't get the fight they want, and you don't get pulled into wasting your energy. Neutral phrases are powerful because they break the cycle of escalation. Normally, arrogance thrives in a back and forth rhythm. They make a comment, you defend, they push harder, and the tension builds. But when you drop a neutral phrase, it's like putting a wrench in the gears. Suddenly, there's no momentum for the argument to build on. Instead of rising to their level of intensity, you keep the tone flat, and that flatness kills the fuel they were hoping to run on. Here's the beauty of it. Neutral doesn't mean dismissive or sarcastic. It's not rolling your eyes and saying, whatever. That would still feed the fire. Neutral is steady, polite, and short. Phrases like, I see what you mean, or interesting perspective are perfect because they give nothing to grab onto. They don't validate arrogance, but they don't challenge it either. That middle ground is exactly where you want to be when someone is trying to provoke you. One of the best parts of using neutral phrases is that it buys you time. Instead of rushing to defend yourself or scramble for the perfect comeback, you're able to stay calm and keep the conversation from spinning out of control. While they're waiting for you to rise to the bait, your neutral phrase shuts the door and gives you a chance to step back mentally. It's like pressing pause on the conflict while still keeping your composure. That pause keeps you grounded and protects you from saying something you'll regret later. Now, some people worry that using neutral phrases makes them look passive, but it's the opposite. Neutral phrases aren't about ignoring what's happening. They're about choosing not to play the game. It's like stepping onto a chessboard with someone who cheats. The smartest move isn't to try to win their way. It's to walk off the board entirely. Neutral responses let you stay present without playing by their toxic rules. That's not passive. That's strategic. It shows that you value your peace over their need for control. And here's the part that really matters. When you practice this skill consistently, people notice. Colleagues, friends, or family members who witness you handle arrogance with calm, neutral responses will see who actually held control of the moment. You don't have to win an argument to win respect. Sometimes the most commanding thing you can do is say less, stay neutral, and keep moving forward. Neutral phrases might feel small in the moment, but they are one of the sharpest tools you can use to cut through the noise of toxic behavior. One of the smartest ways to deal with arrogant or toxic people is by turning their own words back on them with questions. Arrogant people often make bold, sweeping statements without much substance behind them. They thrive on dominating the conversation and shutting down anyone who challenges them. But when you calmly ask clarifying questions, you shift the pressure back to them without being aggressive. Instead of defending yourself, you're inviting them to explain, and suddenly the spotlight isn't on you anymore, it's on them. Clarifying questions are powerful because they slow the pace of the conversation. Toxic people depend on keeping the exchange fast and overwhelming, throwing out sharp comments before you have time to respond. But when you ask something like, "What makes you say that?" or "Can you explain what you mean by that?" you're forcing them to pump the brakes. You're not attacking them. You're not escalating. You're just calmly requesting details. That pause often reveals how shallow or exaggerated their statements really are. This strategy works especially well because arrogant people don't expect to be questioned without hostility. They're used to two types of reaction, either people arguing back or people backing down. But clarifying questions are different. They're neutral, curious, and composed. That unexpected response throws them off balance because it requires thought rather than dominance. The arrogance that felt so loud and sharp suddenly feels a lot less intimidating when they have to slow down and actually explain themselves. Let's take an example. Imagine someone says in a condescending tone, "You clearly don't understand how this works." The natural reaction might be to snap back or to shrink away. Instead, you calmly ask, "Okay, can you walk me through how you see it working?" That question doesn't agree with their arrogance, but it also doesn't attack them. It subtly shifts the burden of proof onto them. Now, instead of you defending yourself, they have to provide clarity, and that often strips away the false confidence their arrogance was built on. Another benefit of asking clarifying questions is that it creates accountability. When toxic people throw out insults, exaggerations, or overgeneralizations, questions make them own their words. If someone arrogantly says, "Everyone knows you're wrong about this," a calm reply like, "Who do you mean by everyone?" forces them to back up their claim. Most of the time, their statements are baseless, and your question exposes that without you having to raise your voice or prove a thing. The accountability is built into the question itself. It's also worth noting that questions shift your own mindset in the moment. Instead of taking their arrogance personally and letting emotions run the show, you're stepping into curiosity. Curiosity creates distance between you and the attack. You stop thinking, "How dare they talk to me this way?" and start thinking, "Let's see what they actually mean by that." That mental shift gives you breathing room. It keeps you in control of your response and prevents their arrogance from hijacking your emotions. When you practice this skill, you'll find that not every arrogant comment needs a fight. Sometimes the best way to reveal the weakness in their stance is simply to ask them to explain it. Questions are not only less confrontational, they're more strategic. They put the weight of the conversation where it belongs, on the person making the claim. And even if they dodge the question or get defensive, you've still succeeded because you didn't let them drag you into defending yourself on their terms. You stayed calm, curious, and in control while their arrogance showed itself for what it was. There comes a point in dealing with arrogant or toxic people where the smartest move isn't to keep responding, but to step away. Not every conversation is worth your energy, and not every person deserves unlimited access to your time. Exiting with grace is about knowing when to disengage without letting it become a dramatic scene. You don't storm out, you don't slam the door with a final insult, and you don't need to make a grand statement. You leave calmly, confidently, and without apology because your peace is more valuable than staying in a toxic exchange. The mistake many people make is thinking they owe a toxic person endless engagement. We convince ourselves that if we just explain better or argue longer, maybe we'll finally get through to them. But arrogant people aren't looking for understanding. They're looking for control. Every extra word you give them is fuel. Exiting with grace takes away that fuel entirely. When you walk away, the argument has nowhere to go. You've cut off the supply, and that is often the most powerful statement you can make. Exiting doesn't always mean physically leaving the room, though sometimes it does. It can also mean mentally stepping out of the argument by no longer engaging with it. If someone is trying to bait you into a fight, a graceful exit could be as simple as saying, "I'll let you have the last word," and moving on. That phrase disarms their need for dominance because you're not challenging them anymore, but you're also not giving them your energy. It's a clean cut. No drama, no explanation, just a quiet refusal to play. One of the best ways to exit with grace is to keep your language short and polite. Statements like, "I've got to get back to my day," or "let's pause this for now," communicate a boundary without sparking more conflict. Notice how those phrases are neutral and calm. They don't carry sarcasm or attitude because that would invite more tension. The goal is to step away without giving the other person anything to grab onto. The smoother your exit, the less opportunity they have to drag you back in. Exiting gracefully also protects your reputation. Other people who